Marco, first of all, welcome to Edinburgh. We're absolutely delighted that you're joining us at the Asia-Scotland Institute here in Edinburgh at the Business School to continue our series of discussions about global events as Director of Global Strategy Projects. And I know you spend much of your time travelling. You've flown in from Istanbul, for which we're very grateful, and you move between, amongst other places, London, New York and Washington. So it's great to have you here. I wonder if you could start by telling me a little bit about the theme you intend to pursue when you talk to the audience later today.
It's about how the dynamics in the Middle East are setting enormous lessons, huge lessons, not just for the Middle East itself, but many other parts of the developing world. Mm-hmm. That if grievances are not taken care of, if grievances are not addressed, there'll be greater turmoil, greater turbulence, not just regionally, but globally. Mm-hmm. So hence, I would say, if you look at the last, say, the decades starting from the post-Second World War period, starting in the 50s, up until early 2011, late 2010, when the Arab uprisings began, many grievances during those decades were not taken care of.
What would you say those grievances were if you had to enumerate the top 3 or 4?
There's several of them, and obviously is the issues if you look at corruption, governance, lack of opportunity, just a society being closed economically, closed politically. It just kills the human spirit, and particularly in those closed societies, if there's even oppression, physical oppression also, that oppression at some stage there'll be some reaction. Sometimes it'll take longer. Sometimes those reactions happen immediately, but in the case of the Middle East, it happened much longer. It was long overdue, in my opinion. These uprisings at some stage, some form of uprising was inevitable. But once again, I thought I thought they would occur earlier, but they did occur at some stage, and it's occurred on a massive scale, particularly through certain countries. Wherever it was greater, wherever the oppression was greater, wherever the form of repression, oppression, and you can also say lack of opportunity, that's where the reaction has been greatest.
If we look at Egypt, for example, and the extraordinary situation that appears to have happened there, the sort of reversal of what appeared to be a democratic process of electing a president from the Muslim Brotherhood, and yet we now see the army coming back in again. Is there a lesson to be learnt there?
Huge lesson and a massive lesson. That's probably the lesson number one for all the other countries in the region and beyond, is basically if you fail to achieve a consensus, and it's not easy to do so, but if you take a majoritarian approach to democracy, particularly at the early stages of a nascent democracy, majoritarian view meaning winner take all, I think it will fail. Yeah. If not in the short term, it'll definitely fail in the long term. Yeah. In the case of Egypt, it was in the short term because Morsi failed to achieve any sort of consensus. He was elected to power. It was only 1/3 of the electorate showed up, and he barely won half of that. That's not a mandate. And if you don't have a mandate, it even underscores the need to achieve that consensus.
I know you've been commenting a lot on television and in your writing about the situation in Syria. And I suppose Syria, how that sort of affects the rest of the world, the way in which the Western powers reacted or didn't. What do you propose to say about that?
Syria, I think I want to say it's too late, but the fragmentation of the state, the protracted state of conflict will continue for quite a while. Even if there is some form of ceasefire, it will be a series of ceasefires. They won't last long. It'll be just a process of that'll be unfolding in the years to come. There'll not be stability. So although Syria may exist on paper as a nation state, it may have a seat at the United Nations, it may have a seat at the Arab League, in essence, or you can say de facto, it won't really remain a state. It'll be a balkanized, fragmented country ruled by several warlords. It may be that Assad still remains the most powerful, primus inter pares, the first amongst equals of various warlords, but we're far too down the road unless something radical takes place whereby there is some real responsible leadership that can begin a process of reconciliation. But that'll take years. There's been over 100,000 dead. And with over 100,000 dead, unless there's some external role within Syria, that reconciliation will be even more difficult to achieve.
Is there a moral in this for bigger Asian countries such as China and India? Should the Chinese worry as they observe this about their ability to hold together a potentially fragmented country?
when the Arab Spring, when the Arab uprisings, we can call, I think the term spring is way
It's
past
now,
history.
yeah.
It's past
Fall,
history.
the Arab Fall, maybe.
Chinese media was doing its best to try to prevent any form of news from coming in, particularly in places like Libya
Yeah.
and in places like Syria,
Yeah.
where in places like Syria particularly, you have a greater amount of diversity, sectarian,
Sure.
religious, and obviously in China there is a great amount of diversity within the country, from the far west of the country all the way to the east, to the north, to the south. And when they see these type of states, these examples whereby a state is beginning to fall apart, particularly on a sectarian basis, that's one of the greatest fears I think that the Chinese government has, is breakdown of the country itself.
Well, Marco, you're going to give us a lot to think about when you speak to us here in Edinburgh later this evening. Again, thank you for coming. Marco, you're an important member now of our International Advisory Council at the Asia Scotland Institute, which, as you know, our mission is to educate and equip tomorrow's leaders in Scotland with the skills to re-engage internationally and with Asia in the way that their forebears did. So thank you again for being with us, and we look forward very much to hearing what you have to say, Marco.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.